Welcome, subscribers, to your special, virtually commercial-free edition of Dreamland. You'll hear one commercial for our sale in our store, and you'll hear commercials for the book, and that is it. Nothing more than that. And I hope you enjoyed it. And also, don't miss the special subscriber interview this week. It is remarkable. Dr. Goldberg reads my past and future lives, a very unexpected, fascinating, and wonderful thing. Next week, we have Plum Island, Lab 257. Do you know there's an island right off the coast of Connecticut where Lyme disease probably originated? And this is a quite startling story about a problem that if you live anywhere in the Northeast, or in fact anywhere in this country, you need to know about. Plum Island, Lab 257. Don't miss it next week. Thanks very much for subscribing to this website and keeping it all going. I owe it to you. And especially for you, next week we have an analysis of the oil situation. As you know, Shell Oil has recently massively reduced its reserves. Certain countries, as we have been saying on Unknown Country for some time, are overstating their reserves in order to get loans. And the reality is there's an oil crisis brewing unlike anything we've ever seen before, because there's a lot less oil out there than has been claimed. We want you to stay ahead of the game, and that's why we're setting this up. You will have get a real insight into what to expect and how to deal with it in your own life next week as a subscriber to Unknown Country. What's that beautiful music you're hearing? Well, that is from Gifts of the Angel, Stephen Halpern's lovely album, which is on sale right now at the unknowncountry.com store. Click on the store, go to the great sales section, and you will find all kinds of lovely stuff on sale right now. The sale is just about over. When these things go out of stock, they're gone forever. So do go to the unknowncountry.com sale. Well, I'm talking to Dr. Bruce Goldberg right now, and this is fascinating. Past Lives, Future Lives Revealed. Dr. Goldberg, you may remember, is the author of a very, very famous book, Past Lives, Future Lives. He was the guy who made the breakthrough into the whole concept that we could find out our future lives, and that he feels there are time travelers actually coming back into our era from the future, something, as you know, having the author of The Secret School is near and dear to my heart. And I will be I'm just so eager to talk to him. He's also a hypnotherapist par excellence and known as one of the greats. And he's been on everything, CBS News, Regis and Kathy, CNN, Oprah, you name it. So now he's on Dreamland. And I was reading your book. You had a very interesting experience involving Art Bell back when he was the host of Dreamland and Coast to Coast AM. Why don't we begin? But first, I'd like you to tell us your website, which is quite fascinating.
Okay, it's www.dr, that's small D as in David, R as in Robert, and then you spell out my name, BRUCEGOLDBERG.com. So it's a drbrucegoldberg.com with the DR for the doctor.
Okay, and later on, for our subscribers, there's going to be a very interesting thing done. I'm going to do one of these regressions. We're going to find out something about what my future lives may or may not be. We'll just see what it's like. But anyway, before we go on, tell us, Dr. Goldberg, and I'm going to ask you all kinds of questions about yourself in a moment.
Sure.
But I wanted you to tell us this thing about Art Bell, because it's very interesting and arresting, and it sort of gets us in the mood, if you will.
Okay. Well, the technique is called an Akashic record scan, and what that means is that when the psychic reads a person, we can also be trained to do this ourselves. An Akashic record is like a chart of all our past, present, parallel, and future lives. So we go into parallel lives too. So with Art, I did a Akashic record scan to kind of focus in on his karmic purposes, that what he did in the past that may have related to his hosting. You know, he created the Coast to Coast AM and the Dreamland, of course. So what I found out was that in 50,000 BC, Art lived in Atlantis, and he was a geophysicist/quantum physicist by the name of Draco, D-R-A-K-O. And he developed mathematical models for time travel that were, in fact, accurate. He was married at the time to a woman named Myra, M-E-I-R-A-H, which was the past life of Ramona, his current wife. Okay? And he accurately predicted the first of three major cataclysms that occurred on Atlantis at about 50,000 BC. Now, the problem was he wanted to get the message out to the public to save many lives because of the pre-knowledge of this cataclysm. Nobody would let him do anything. Atlantis had television and radio, by the way. There was a medical reporter, a TV reporter by the name of Forat, who was the only one to grant Draco airtime so that he could announce these catastrophes, and many thousands of people, including Myra, his wife, and Forat, the medical reporter, and many thousands were saved. Draco went down with the island, so to speak, or at least the first phase, and was killed as a result of staying on Atlantis during the actual cataclysm. Forat, by the way, the medical TV reporter, was one of my past lives, which made it even more interesting, and at least to me personally. And Draco and Myra both belonged to a religion in Atlantis that worshipped cats. There were two major religions. One worshipped cats, and one was the bull worship religion. The bull one was the majority, by the way. But as you know, Art is, shall we say, a little obsessed with cats, in his life. This was, to me, very relevant to what he does now. At the same time, the media involved, it just fit in. And when I described it to him on Dreamland about 5 years ago, he said, "Well, doctor, it fits, I'll tell you." And I think it does, too. And this is an example of what one can do with an Akashic Record scan. And by the way, the script for that, for this technique called the Akashic Record scan, is in the Past Lives, Future Lives Revealed. It's also on my website for your people out there who can access it and download it right from the homepage.
Okay, well, I'm really having fun. I have to tell you, I've got so many questions now. My head is kind of spinning here. Okay, let me start out. Let's start where probably everybody wants to start. Who the heck are you? It's so cool. Tell us about yourself a little bit.
Well, my background is unusual in the sense that I started off, I had undergraduate training in biology and chemistry, and then I went to dental school and practiced dentistry for 13 years, actually, and 11 of those 13 years were only part-time. When I was a senior in dental school in 1974, I actually started dealing with hypnosis and trying to experiment with the concept of taking people into past lives. I had read the Bridie Murphy story, if you're familiar, from the 1950s. A man named Maury Bernstein in 1956 wrote this humongous bestseller about a documented case of a past life regression. And I did it more like just as a kind of a toy, a hobby, if you will. The very first patient I worked with, however, was a woman who was able to overcome two habits and a phobia. And that said to me, look, I'm a clinician, and there's something more to this other than just titillation. This is therapeutic. And so therefore, and she was also a graduate student in a master's social work program, so she was, very attuned also to the concept of therapeutic orientations. So I said, okay, if this is what the universe wants, I'm going to do it. And since then, I've done 35,000 regressions and progressions in over 14,000 different patients. And, people, when they talk about, by the way, subsequent to my dental degree, I also have a master's in counseling psychology, and I've written about 30 articles in scientific journals to go along with now. This is my 17th book, Past Lives, Future Lives Revealed. And I do a lot of education with the public. I do workshops. And in fact, on my website, your listeners out there can focus. And if they live in Canada, I'll be there in May and June, and all my workshops are posted on there on the workshop link, if you will. But what was interesting about the documentation, see, people always talk about reincarnation. They say, look, either you accept it or you don't. The most recent Gallup poll showed that 58% of Americans now believe in reincarnation. That's a surprising figure to most people. So it's not the minority, now it's the majority. You could win the White House with those numbers,
Yeah.
But secondly, I did a case in 1988 of a woman who was, I call her Ivy, not her real name, and she was obsessively attracted to a man who literally tried to murder her on 3 different occasions in her current life. As it turned out, she had 46 past life regressions done. In 20 of those, the same man, we'll call him Johnny, murdered her in every way you can possibly imagine. And at the same time, she gave me of her last life, most recent one was in Buffalo, New York, as a woman named Grace Doze. And I had that information, but I didn't do a lot of research on it. I just sort of she was able to break this negative relationship. We call this a retribution soulmate. It's a negative one. And she was able to go on with her life. Well, as it turns out, subsequent research showed that this was an unbelievably documented case, eventually turned over to CBS to do the documentation. And in 1994, the Search for Grace was aired as a TV movie based on my second book of the same name by CBS, and it was one of the most documented cases of the last century, because Two of the facts of the 24 she gave me did not corroborate with newspaper reports. As it turned out, she was right, the reporters were wrong. And in New York, unlike California, where I live, in Los Angeles here, you have to get political permission, and a paper trail has to exist to go into birth and death certificates. Nobody did that from 1927 until 1992 when CBS did the research. So it stands out as an unbelievably documented case, but also it was a lot of fun. A lot of people saw the movie, and it just gave additional credibility, if you will, to the field on a scientific basis or a real basis, not just some woman who allegedly had a fantasy, which a lot of people think regressions are. They're actually not. So then, with the concept of a 1982, my first book, Past Lives, Future Lives, if you will, was released, which is the first book ever written about taking people into future lifetimes. Now, I know I'm not the first person in the world to ever do that, but nobody wrote anything on it. I don't know why, but nobody decided to do that until 1982 when I did Past Lives, Future Lives. Well, when it comes to progression now we have a situation where people say, now look, regression is bad enough, progression, you got to be kidding. Well, when you deal with taking people as far forward as the 50th century, which I've done, obviously you have to be pretty patient to perceive things occurring. But when you do age progressions, going into the future of this life is what I refer to as age progression. And by the way, there is a script on that in the Past Lives, Future Lives Revealed book too. What I can do is document things that actually occur in the future and then see if they actually occur. In June of 1996, a woman came to me from New York City. Her name was, I call her Tammy. She was just graduated from college, and she was going to go to Europe the last half of the summer, and she wanted to come out to Los Angeles to my office to do some out-of-body travel and to do some progressions going to the future, which, of course, I'm well known for, and I said, fine. She was a great student. She's a bright young woman, just everything going for her. While she's in town, most of my patients come out of town. They stay here for like 5 days. She was able to perceive little things in her life about an hour or a half a day or a day in advance that actually took place and came true during the 5 days she was here. So she had a good psychic hit record, if you will. She goes home to New York, and then about 2 weeks later, about third week in June, she calls me up. Remember, it's 1996, and she goes, "Doctor, I have an emergency." And I said, "Tammy, I retired from dentistry to get away from emergencies. What's going on?" And she said that, "I see myself going to Europe next month, July, and my plane takes off at JFK. It goes up in the air, it goes down, I crash, and I die. What do I do?" And I said, "Tammy, I encourage people to be empowered, psychically empowered. Let me give you a little hint. Change your flight, okay? Give me a call at the end of the summer." She calls me around Labor Day when she gets back from Europe, and she's very excited, and she says, "Doctor, you saved my life," which, of course, I did not do. And I said, "What's going on?" She was going to go on TWA Flight 800.
Oh, my God.
Now, July 17th, 1996, 230 people are on the astral plane because of that particular plane crash. She would have been 231. So not only are progressions real, in this case, it saved her life. So this is the laws of the universe. You can actually do that. The future is plastic, and you can avoid catastrophes by having this precognition, if you will, or I call progression into the future. Now, going into future lives...
that happened to a relative of mine last night.
Really?
Yeah, I'll tell you what happened. He and his wife they live out somewhere on the West Coast. My son lives in San Francisco, and this is another relative, and I think they live in, Santa Barbara, I think it is. Anyway, we were talking on the phone today, and he said, I had the weirdest thing happen last night. I was just panicking and very nervous. He's a very quiet guy, very easygoing. He said, I couldn't sleep. I kept waking up, and I kept thinking there's going to be an earthquake. Something is wrong. Something is just really, really wrong. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, a prowler tried to get into their house. And he was wide awake, waiting for as he said, I was waiting for the sky to fall. Mm-hmm. And he'd been aware of this all evening. It had been just torturing him. He didn't know what it was, but he just knew something was about to happen.
But he was getting this is what we call, now this is actually an Akashic Record scan is what he's doing. This is what we call a warning psychic experience, where his higher self was trying to alert him that there is a problem. He may not have gotten all the specifics, but he knew something was up, so he was prepared for something rather than just being totally taken out of context and not being able to perhaps handle the situation as ideally as he could have, you see.
Now, we're going to get right back, and I'm going to ask you when we get back, it's exactly why would it be that one person would have something like that happen and another guy, a prowler, the first time he sees the prowler is when the guy's standing over him in the bed. This is Whitley Strieber. It's Dreamland. We'll be right back. Past lives, future lives. Dr. Bruce Goldberg makes a fascinating case in his book. Plus, in the book, he shows you how you can test his case yourself. You can actually test this by finding your own past and future lives. He lays out how to do it. It's not hard. And will you find just your own imagination, or will it be something really, really surprising? Well, there's one way to find out. Get the book from the unknowncountry.com store. This is Whitley Strieber. It's Dreamland. We are back. We're talking with Dr. Bruce Goldberg. Cool book, Past Lives, Future Lives Revealed. Okay, why would, just before we left the air, I talked about a call, oddly, synchronistically, I got it from a relative not even an hour ago, telling me about something that happened to him last night that was definitely precognitive. And I asked you the question, why would it happen? Some people would have, and this guy has had this sort of thing before in his life. He's a very psychic, kind of tuned person who doesn't really believe it or think about it much, but it just sort of happens in his life.
Right. He's naturally what we call sensitive and responsive. See, we all have a higher self that's more than happy to educate us. The problem is most people just tune it out and don't listen to the higher self. And there's also another expression. This is an old Kabbalistic expression that I put in my books, and that is that when the student is ready, the teacher will be there, which means that sometimes people are supposed to experience, let's say, a robbery or something that we would consider to be negative for the purpose of learning from the experience and maybe what not to do or what to do, rather than avoiding it. Obviously, in the Tammy case I described, where she saved her life by not going on TWA Flight 800, she could have not learned that lesson and died in the crash. So it's a question of if you access your higher self, which is really the key. I call this a superconscious mind tap. This is a technique I developed back in 1977 to train people to access the perfect part of their soul's awareness. We call this the higher self, or another term is the superconscious mind. By doing that, you can now access the part of your awareness that's perfect and can give you the information, not just for titillation and not just to get rich and win the lottery. Okay, you have to remember there's a mentality here. If you're supposed to know something or learn something, then you will. If you're not, then you won't. And I don't make those decisions. Neither does anybody on the earth plane. That's all done in the fifth dimension, as we call it, where the higher self resides.
Now, give us an idea of how this works. And I think it's quite fully explained, actually, in the book, but just give us an idea of it.
Well, basically what happens is that when you think of it, when people, I'm sure you and many of your listeners out there have done meditation or some self-hypnosis or some sort of what we call
absolutely. I've been meditating for many years.
And what you're doing is you're trying to, of course, meditation is a little different than hypnosis. Medically, they're the same, but in meditation, you're trying to block out all thoughts and you're trying to be a receiver, if you will. And what you're really trying to receive, or at least the ideal solution here, is to receive information from the higher self. And what happens is what you're actually doing is you're doing a fifth dimensional channeling, if you will. Your higher self actually resides in what we call the fifth dimension. We live in a three-dimensional world, length, width, and depth. Time is considered the fourth dimension, technically the fourth dimension of the space-time continuum, if you deal with astrophysicists. And then the fifth dimension is anything beyond it. You might relate to it like the word astral plane or these other dimensions people talk about in out-of-body travel. Well, the higher self is in this dimension, if you will, the fifth dimension. And we really are now. We just can't see. Our physical senses are designed only for three dimensions because we have a physical body. But when you go into an altered state of consciousness, or we call this alpha, the medical level of the brainwave, then you now can receive, you actually are able to pick up, if you will, eavesdrop, the proverbial glass against the wall, so to speak, of the fifth dimension. And now you're channeling into your higher self. And that's really all you need to do. If you open that up and let that receptibility come in, not try to critically analyze it and bring in the defense mechanisms, which what people tend to do, but to open it up, then you'll be dealing with the actual higher self, and then, of course, anything is possible. And, for example, let me show you how people do this very exotically.
Yeah.
Here's a classic example. I have a section from Past Lives, Future Lives Revealed where I talk about this man. No one's ever heard of this man. I know you're a writer, and you know I'm a writer, and there's a man named Morgan Robertson. I guarantee you nobody out there knows who he is.
No, it's not ringing a bell.
Morgan Robertson wrote a novel in 1898 entitled Utility. In this particular novel, a supposedly unsinkable ocean liner struck an iceberg on its maiden voyage and sank, carrying the elite society of two continents to their death. Well, the name of his ship was the Titan.
Oh, my goodness.
14 years later, in 1912, an unsinkable liner sailed from England with 3,000 passengers. Like Robertson's craft, it was 800 feet long, weighed 70,000 tons with far too few lifeboats. All right? The real boat, like Robinson, struck an iceberg, sank with the loss of more than 1,000 lives. The Titanic, everybody knows about. Nobody knows about the Titan. Now, this man, Morgan Robinson, he accessed the Akashic Records with intimate details and laid out the future 14 years later of the Titanic catastrophe. Now, that's pretty heavy and very well documented.
That's really amazing. And, of course, accessing this record, why would we not live with this record always? Is it so hard to access?
Well, because it would be considered cheating the universe. For example, if you could access your Akashic records, and let's say, for example, you were supposed to, now I know this sounds a little negative, but just bear with me. Let's say you're supposed to have a car accident. It doesn't hurt you, damages your car slightly, but as a result of the car accident, you hook up with someone, whether it be the person who hits you or you hit, or through the various insurance, blah, 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 that goes on, you somehow or are distracted and don't maybe make a meeting or are late, but something positive results from that, you see? Well, that's fine, except people say, I don't want to have a car accident, And in other words, you might be, if you decide to, I'm not going to go on that route or take that car, that I'm going to leave it half an hour later, you would then be playing games with destiny and avoiding karmic lessons and tests, you see? So the universe is not here for us to be titillated. People say, well, why don't you just go into the future and win the lottery and go on the stock market and not be like Martha Stewart, I mean, we're not supposed to do that because we're supposed to learn things. Sometimes the School of Hard Knocks is the most, exquisite training program we have. So we can't just cheat the universe. You can't cheat death either. Tammy wasn't really supposed to die, the one who avoided TWA Flight 800, which is why she didn't. So we're not cheating the universe, but there are times when people, for example, I used to do a late-night radio show in Baltimore about 20 years ago, and this man called up in 1982, and I had seen him several years before, and he was a blue-collar worker who got injured on the job and wanted to do some what I call karmic capitalism, which means he wanted to get a new life, if you will, of earning income because he couldn't work as a blue-collar worker anymore. He was on the assembly line at General Motors, whatever. But he, at the same time, he had a lot of problems. He needed money, whatever. He needed $5,000 to start a new business as an entrepreneurial pursuit. No one would loan him any money because his credit was terrible. So he uses my technique of going into the future, age progression, and he wins exactly $5,000 in the Maryland State Lottery. Okay? Now, that's public record, right? Now, he didn't win $1 million. He didn't win $10 million. He won exactly enough money to get him started in this business. I heard him because he called me when I was on the air several years later, and everything was successful. Business was going well, and of course, I wish he hadn't told me that on the air because you can imagine the phone calls I got the following Monday morning. Right?
A lot.
Every tout, every stockbroker, every person in the world. But this is the kind of thing the universe gave him enough to do his thing, but didn't spoil him, if you will. See?
Now, by spoiling him, what you're saying is it would remove what is not wanted is that the spontaneity of life be removed. Is that what it is?
Right. It would be like you going through life. Let's say you and Ann having a conversation that's totally scripted. There's nothing spontaneous. You're just like acting in a play. That wouldn't be a lot of fun. That would
be like a nightmare.
Unless you were doing the producers. I mean, it wouldn't be a lot of fun. We have to learn things. Spontaneity is actually critical to our karmic growth. First of all, it would be boring if it would be like Groundhog Day for most people anyway. But we just simply have to respond. You have to learn lessons, be exposed to things, and have the free will. Remember, we always have free will. And this is so people have the right to do things empoweredly or to be an idiot. You can do whatever you want, and no one's going to force you either way. We live in a free country, But so these universal laws, as we call it, allow us to maximize our growth without impinging on others. At the same time, being able to, as they used to say in the '60s, do our own thing.
Now, one of the things with I've had, you probably know this, close encounter experiences. One of the things that's never happened to me, but that we get a small number but consistent reports of, is that the person will be shown their future life when they're during a close encounter experience,
right.
And then they'll be in a state of deja vu. In one case, I've known the guy for, I guess, 18 years, and he's still in a permanent state of deja vu because of it. And what does that mean?
Well, deja vu really is an outdated term. What that means is that you have, let's say, people do this, they have a dream. And by the way, dreams are often the sneak previews of these regression and progression experiences of past and future lives, too. Let's say you have a dream, a daydream. We go through daydreams throughout the day normally anyway for about 4 hours, like watching television, working on computers, listening to music. So you have a daydream that you immediately repress about an event that's going to occur in about 20 minutes or half an hour. Now you immediately repress it as the event unfolds. Now it's like history repeating itself. That's what deja vu is. It really is an age progression. Now, with the close encounter of the third kind, where there's an abduction, if you will, he's taken aboard a craft, as you'll see when we talk about time travelers from our future, time travelers actually use crafts or sometimes underground military installations, which shows now a conspiracy aspect because the governments obviously know about these time travelers as well as the ETs. Then they can be shown their own little holograms, if you will, of past, present, and future events for the purpose of growth. Remember, the point, as we'll discuss in time travels, is they're here for our spiritual growth because they're us in the future. The more we progress, the more they progress. So they have a self-interest in our growth. The ETs may not necessarily have the same interest, but what is going on is this person sounds like he's permanently in an alpha state, which is not the healthiest in the world, because he still has to, if he can't function on the other level of the waking, the cognitive, analytical, what we call left brain, if you will, that he may be walking around like he's in a Venice Beach daze.
Well, he is a bit dazed. It's true. Not quite a Venice Beach, but it's a daze. And he always has a slightly surprised expression on his face. He's kind of an interesting guy. But let me get back to something else, though.
Sure.
If there is such a thing as reincarnation, and I believe it, I'm quite certain of it for all kinds of personal reasons, then would it not be true that you could come back from a future life and see yourself? What would happen if you did that?
Well, this really becomes more relevant with the time travelers.
That's what I'm saying, the time travel thing.
Run into themselves. For one thing, one nice thing that makes it easier not to worry about that is that, see, there is a concept called parallel universe. Right. Parallel universe is not just a sci-fi channel theory here. It's actually a scientific demonstrable fact. We have tons of studies on it. It's been around since 1957. Hugh Everett III at Princeton University came up with this. The many worlds phenomena was his doctoral dissertation in quantum mechanics, which is quantum physics. So if a time traveler goes back in time, and let's say you've killed a grandfather, and how can you exist is the old classic paradox. You're going to go into a parallel universe when you do that. So you may kill your grandfather and not exist on parallel universe number 38, but on 1 through 37 and 39 through 10 billion, you still exist.
You still exist.
You can't knock yourself off on every parallel universe. So it doesn't really matter whether you change history. It's a question of which parallel universe are you changing history of.
Okay, well, it's very interesting because I want to ask you, I'm dying to ask you, can we move between parallel universes? How would that feel? Now, but we have to take a little break. This is Whitley Strieber. It's Dreamland. We'll be right back with Dr. Bruce Goldberg. Past lives, future lives. Dr. Bruce Goldberg makes a fascinating case in his book. Plus, in the book, he shows you how you can test his case yourself. You can actually test this by finding your own past and future lives. He lays out how to do it. It's not hard. And will you find just your own imagination, or will it be something really, really surprising? Well, there's one way to find out. Get the book from the unknowncountry.com store. This is Whitley Strieber. It's Dreamland. We're talking to Dr. Bruce Goldberg, a way cool book, Past Lives, Future Lives Revealed. His website, drbrucegoldberg.com. And before we left the air, I was just going to ask you about what happens when we were going to talk about what happens when a person gets involved with themselves in their own past life, and can we move like between parallel universes?
Well, when a person does a past life regression, let's say, like for example, just as a sneak preview tease, as we say in the media, you're going to have an Akashic record scan by me in a short while here in reference to a past life in India in 14,000 BC and one in a future life in the 25th century in Australia. So now, if it was you doing this rather than me, in other words, reviewing your own past and future life, all you're doing is watching.
I'm sitting here fairly surprised at what he just said, but go on. Okay.
You'll see the relevance when we do this in detail. But see, what you're doing is like sort of like watching a movie in a way, like a TV monitor. You're not really affecting the past life. You're just observing it as a passive observer. Now, the time travel is very different. If you want to move through parallel universes, that's something else. Now, I have I like to always train people with the use of tapes. I have something called the Time Travelers Training Program. It's a 6-cassette tape album where what people are trained to do is to go into the fifth dimension. And when you go into the fifth dimension, remember, it's beyond length, width, depth, and time. Now you can actually travel to the past or the future. You can do out-of-body travel to view our civilization in 1,000 or 1,500 years. Or you can actually travel into what we call the corridors of hyperspace, which are really parallel universes. So you can perceive yourself right now on a different parallel universe that you look at genetically the same, and still around, and your kids and your family, everybody's the same, except your actions are different, and therefore the circumstances in which you live are quite different. Okay, so that's called the parallel universe. And this is not a different dimension. This is still the Earth plane. It's just a sister universe. For those people that may want some, a little bit documentation and think this is a little bit, science fiction, the August 2000 issue of Scientific American, which is a very respected magazine. It's actually very technical. It's written for the lay public, but you better have a scientific background. You understand this thing. The August issue of 2000 was based on parallel universes, and there's a 7-page article. And at the very bottom of page 67 of the 7-page article, it says, the nearest sister universe, according to current science, hyperspace physics and astrophysics, if you will, is less than a millimeter away. Now, you know how long or short, if you will, a millimeter is. So close yet so far. That's what we're talking about. There's overlap. And by the way, there's an infinite number of parallel universes, which is what the many worlds phenomena doctoral dissertation by Hewitt III said. So every time you have a thought, let's say you imagine yourself flying upside down or becoming president of whatever, you actually create a parallel universe in which that is actually occurring. The question is the probability of you actually focusing in and making that your reality now, but you actually create every second of every day, literally, parallel universes with your thoughts.
Now, listeners, if you want to bone up on this and have some fun doing it, go to unknowncountry.com. Go to the search engine, which is about 3/4 of the way down in the left-hand column, and put in the words parallel universe. You will find quite a few stories of 2 Australian scientists who say they found physical evidence of a parallel universe. An article about parallel universes from Discover magazine saying they may be physically real, as Dr. Goldberg was just saying. A physicist who plans to use parallel universes to build a time machine. I mean, this is not kind of speculative stuff anymore that he's talking about. The point he's making, and it's a good one, is we're actually not talking about something that's sort of in the metaphysical realm. We're talking about leading edge, very real physics. In
fact, Whitley, I appreciate that reference, and I'm going to check out your website in detail too. I want to see those also. But let me show you how I use it clinically. Let's say a patient comes to me. We do age progressions into the future. They want to, magnify or empower their lives, and it looks like for whatever they do, they're limited. They're not going to get what they want in life. So I don't recommend either suicide or just settling for less. Okay, what we can do is actually let them. I call this the new you technique. They can actually go into the future and perceive. I have what I call 5 major groupings of parallel universes. There are 5 major categories, and there's an infinite number of parallel universes under every category. So let's say they're on frequency number 1, and that's their below average one, and they go to frequency 4 out of a grouping of 5, and that's their ideal frequency. Then they can be trained to literally switch tracks, and they're going to wake up one day, and they're going to be in their ideal maximum potential parallel universe rather than the one they're in now. And I have many cases to support the documentation of this, that it actually works. In fact, I did this myself to get my movie for television done, because I had no contacts, and the odds of, getting that done is really tough. And I did my little scan. I said, frequency 4 is my best one. I switched into it, and sure enough, within several weeks, the movie was approved. It went into pre-production, and the movie was there 10 years ago. So people can use this to take charge of their lives. There's no harm and no foul, because let's say your current frequency is depressing or negative or whatever you want to call it. it still goes on without you. You're not aware of all these parallel universes. If you were, we'd call you schizophrenic. You'd be getting audible hallucinations and delusions, if you will. So you can simply switch tracks. Your perception is all that matters. Just like the difference between you being on the earth plane now and being out of the body is right now you're identifying with the physical plane. If you were to identify with the astral plane, you would be out of the body and you'd be viewing the world from your astral eyes.
Now, what happens if I shift to another parallel universe? What happens to the me in this universe? Does he kind of go dark, or?
No, he can't because Anne may have the current universe you're in right now, maybe her ideal frequency. You see, you can't just dematerialize into a black hole because that would cause a disruption in the space-time continuum and in the people in that life that depend upon you or that relate to you. If everybody kept on switching, of all the patients if I kept on switching, there'd be a lot of people in this world that would have disappeared. It would be like spontaneous human combustion, I'd have the FBI here, I think, every couple of days.
When you die, do you die in all parallel universes at the same?
Actually, no, that's the point. See, like Tammy didn't. Tammy was dead on one parallel universe. She's alive right now.
In another one, she's a statistic.
Well, that's true. But the point is that no, each parallel universe has a different. I don't call it fate because you're in control. We call it destiny. So you will cross into spirit or clinically die, if you will, at different ages on different parallel universes. See? So that really is, it's a completely different, as the farther you go out in time, the more they are different.
How interesting. And the more do we look different? I mean, if there's one way far away, would we be like in a different form, the Earth a different kind of place? Or?
Well, no, we're talking about, let's say the parallel universe of the same time range now. You're talking about, let's say, right now.
The same moment, yeah.
You're genetically going to be the same. The physical world is going to be the same, but the events will be different based upon individual actions will be different. So you will look exactly the same.
Let me tell you a story about something that happened to me. This is in my book, Breakthrough, and I've talked about it a number of times. I'll just be very brief.
Sure.
I was taking a little boy to meet his dad. He was a friend of my son's, and we used to meet at a diner in Paramus, New Jersey, which was midway between our two country houses in the summer, and we'd trade kids. So I was taking his little boy, to the diner, and we get to the turnoff, and I can see his father sitting there we're on Route 17, which is a divided highway, and sitting there in his truck. He sees us. I turn off the exit to go over a bridge and then come back to the diner, which I've done 100 times. It's no big deal. And when we get off, we're in like another universe. I mean, it is totally different roads, streets. There's no Paramus Mall. We were right beside the Paramus Mall. There's shade. It's a lot shady trees. It's a clear day. It was a cloudy day in our universe. And there are these sort of low buildings set back from the road with, kind of look like sandstone with kind of snakes etched in relief on their surfaces. And the little boy is very frightened, and he starts trying to jump out of the car, and I'm frantically pushing the lock back down and driving around in this lunatic area trying to figure out, what can I do? I mean, have I taken this kid? What has happened here?
Did you see other vehicles on the road?
No, he did, but I don't. I just vaguely remember seeing some. I was so interested.
Did he report the vehicles being of an older model?
No, he didn't see. He just saw. We hardly talked about it.
Okay.
He might have seen a car. I might have seen a car, but there was nobody alive. There was nobody around. For the first few seconds, we were on kind of an expressway, and then we were up in a neighborhood. But anyway, I took a couple of turns, and I ended up in this strange sort of vacant area, and I drove through it. It was like ruins, not building ruins, but like overgrown and a big mess. And suddenly we were on Route 80, and we had to go back 20 miles to get to the diner. By the time we got back to the diner, his father was like standing in the bed of his pickup looking for us because he was nervous. And this is a guy who was very super skeptical. He was the last person you want to have a thing like this happen with. And so I'm thinking, well, maybe maybe the little boy won't say anything about it. And because I hadn't said much to him because I didn't want to upset him. It was obvious that something weird had happened, though. So he jumps out of my car and goes running across the parking lot yelling, "Daddy, Daddy, Whitley took me on a trip through the Twilight Zone." Now, what the heck What's your take on this?
Okay, my take is what we call a slip in time. It sounds like
unfortunately, we've come to one of those breaks that us radio people are such devils about. We're going to take a little break. We'll be right back, and he's going to tell us just what the heck happened back then. This is Whitley Strieber at Dreamland. We'll be right back. Past Lives, Future Lives. Dr. Bruce Goldberg makes a fascinating case in his book. Plus, in the book, he shows you how you can test his case yourself. You can actually test this by finding your own past and future lives. He lays out how to do it. It's not hard. And will you find just your own imagination, or will it be something really, really surprising? Well, there's one way to find out. Get the book from the unknowncountry.com store. This is Whitley Strieber. It's Dreamland. We're talking to Dr. Bruce Goldberg, Past Lives, Future Lives Revealed. For subscribers, he's going to do a regression/progression on me. That'll be available in the subscriber section. He's already mentioned a little bit about it, and I'm really fascinated. It'll be fascinating to find out what it's like. In any case, what was this experience I described just before we left the air?
You're talking about what looks like a slip in time. This is an actual teleportation. Now, this gets heavy. Sounds like you and the other two people involved teleported either back or forward significantly in time. And, for example, there are lots of cases where people drive along a road and they're going to, let's say, a little shop somewhere, a little mini mall, and all of a sudden they're back in the 1930s. And everybody's older looking, older dressed, and the cars are all older, and all of a sudden, within maybe 15, 20 minutes, it disappears and they're back in the modern era. You enter into a tear in the fabric of space-time, and that causes you to now automatically move either back or forward in time. This is a teleportation. Your physical body was there. It's not an out-of-body experience. This is an actual physical slip in time. And there are a lot of cases that have been very well documented in reference to this, by the way.
So it's a physical slipping.
This is a teleportation.
I have no way of knowing whether we went forward or backwards. I mean, you just...
Well, you're talking about there were overgrowths in areas where they didn't seem to be in the current situation. I mean, look, the other.
Well, there were like streets and things, and the thing is, the buildings were very alien looking. They didn't look like. Maybe it's the future.
Well,
I have a feeling that's what it. Or the very, very distant past.
If you were to recreate that trip in the area that you were on, and the buildings don't look the same, then obviously something's going on.
Well, yeah. Well, the guy took his son. I mean, he was determined to prove that this place existed now, because he didn't want his son to believe in all of this stuff that I was with, these aliens and whatnot that were going on in my life then. And so they went and through the whole area, and I actually took a map, a very detailed map, and I drove the area with a pen and marked off every inch of every street until I was sure I had been for 2 or 3 miles up and down each side of that exit and never found anything that looked like it.
Well, so
neither of us did.
This is why I say it's not. If it was identical, except a little bit strange, it could have been a parallel universe. But and that, by the way, is not impossible. But I would suspect that you actually teleported either way back or way forward in time. That's why I was asking about things like vehicles. If there are vehicles, it still could have been 50 years ago, depending on the quality of the year of the model of the vehicles. But when you see something that's like it's almost like there had been a lack of habitation, if you will, to the area with things, moss growing on things, buildings. That's when I assume you're probably going forward in time by a significant amount of time. But that's called a slip in time, and there are many examples of that. Of people who have actually done that all over the world. And to me, that's an example of, all right, this gets us into time travelers, so I'd like to, that's a good segue, actually.
Yeah.
When time travel, let me show you, I'm not going to forget about this, but let me just give you a little background. Time travel will be discovered in about 1,050 years. By the year 3050, a man by the name of Tatos, that's T-A-A-T-O-S, will actually use a mechanism of enlarging a wormhole. This is a subatomic particle that we have today. It's called a wormhole, and make it large enough so that with the use of something called exotic matter, which, by the way, we have the mathematical models today for. Kip Thorne, Caltech University, has worked this out 15 years ago, would actually be able to send a craft with humans back in time and to initiate the actual time travel mentality. I call time travelers chrononauts. The problem with using this large wormhole to send people back in time is that it causes a tear in the fabric of space-time every time you do it. And that's why you have frogs falling from the sky occasionally, and all these unusual, things, these unexplained phenomena, as it's called. And one of the things that happens is also people can actually do teleportation by accidentally, by not purposely, because you can't see these tears, they're just there. And if you walk into one, it's sort of like you walk into a place maybe 5 feet in front of you, and all of a sudden you're halfway around the world. Okay, these are actual teleportation. There are classic examples of that. So the time travelers indirectly cause that. They know that. There's nothing they can do about it because time travel will be done by this for about 400 years. By the 35th century, teleportation itself will actually be the mechanism of time travel, which does not require a tear in the fabric of space-time. Now, I know that sounds very technical, but time travel is not a simple, Jello formula here. It's a very, very specific hyperspace physics things. In the future, though, in 1,000+ years, you're going to get time travelers come back in time. And there's a case in Past Lives, Future Lives Revealed I'd like to describe.
Yeah, please do.
This is a man, his name is John. He came to me in 1996, and he wanted to explore past lives. Well, as it turns out, he went into the future, into the 35th century. The year was 3478. And he lived as a chrononaut, going to the chrononaut training center, which was on a place called Muvia. Now, Muvia is the ancient continent of Lemuria or Mu. It's in the Pacific Ocean like Atlantis was in the Atlantic Ocean. Okay, now, of course, it's sunk, but it will rise, if you will. And in 1,500 years, even less than that, in 1,000 years, it'll be the training ground for time travelers or chrononauts. It's sort of like equivalent to the NASA's Lyndon B. Johnson Space Center in Houston. So these chrononauts, they go through, they have to have a doctorate in hyperspace physics to be eligible. They have to be trained in 3 different phases. One consists of advanced physics, quantum medicine, which is a way of using advanced levels of medicine to heal people by using energy rather than drugs or surgery. They also have to have physical conditioning because they're exposed to a lot of forces out there, like G-forces, except, when you're going back in time, it's even worse. When teleportation is established by the 35th century, the physical conditioning is less relevant. And the third phase is spiritual growth. They have to be experienced in things like hypnosis, chakra balancing, and all kinds of things to help people grow spiritually, which is what they do when they come here and interact with us. Now, so this man, his name is Kamar, K-A-M-A-R, 35th century. He actually, by that time, of course, when he does his time travel, he does teleportation. So I'd like to read. This is the actual statement from a man describing what teleportation feels like in 1,500 years. Okay?
Okay.
This is Kamar's, or John's report is Kamar. The entire trip was characterized by a strange feeling throughout my body. It was as though something twisted my body. I felt like I was caught in a giant web. Suddenly the world exploded into countless billions of glowing threads. They stretched in all directions. I could now perceive that strange twisting sensation that I was experiencing was correlated with the motion of these threads, and they were in constant motion. I could feel the world. I could see the room around me superimposed within the pattern of these threads. I was also aware of things beyond the room, if you will. Now, part of him was totally confused, he says. Another part was completely familiar with whatever this was. This was a very odd sense of my conscious being split. Right now, as he did subsequent teleportations, these feelings became less and less relevant because he became accustomed. All right, now, Movie itself, the training ground, if you will, of the time travelers or the chrononauts, consists of these mushroom-like structures, several hundred feet high. They're called, they have no artificial structures except what are called pyramid-shaped cyacomms. And cyacomms are highly advanced computerized navigation and information structures. They also maintain security on these bases by what are called anti-gravity orbs and trackers. The orbs were spherical devices that function like a satellite, and the trackers were security personnel who patrolled the base in anti-gravity bikes. So it gets heavy. Now, he's transported back in time to about over 100,000 years ago to Lemuria, the real original Lemuria or Mu, as people know about it, the continent that preceded Atlantis in our development, if you will. And there was something called electric wars. Now, this is very complicated. Electric wars were involved. It's a generic name being applied to battles between various ET groups for control of our planet many, many thousands of years ago.
You know, something's very weird's happening right now.
What's that?
I'm having a very strong experience of deja vu, as if I've heard you telling me this before.
See, well...
Go ahead. Okay. This is absolutely fascinating.
All right, now, the two groups that were mainly involved, the Lyran group genetically, if you will, were power-hungry, dogmatic, and authoritarian, and their goal was to enslave us. the Syrian group, which were other ET groups, functioned more as our protectors. The Illyrians came to Earth before the Syrians, so most of the time the Syrians had to play catch-up ball with us to keep us protected. Okay, so now we're talking about 100,000 BC now. The Electric War was actually declared on Atlantis to Mu, or Lemuria, because Atlantis was a militaristic like ancient Rome. Mu was a very spiritual continent, if you will, and Atlantis was jealous, and of course they were just power-hungry. So the ETs got involved, and electric wars were lasted for about 50 years. Whenever light flashes and pulsations were observed, this indicated an interdimensional interface had taken place, and there were a lot of problems to the physical world. A form of interdimensional time portal existed to allow other beings, human and ET, from different dimensions, our past and present, to enter the world and interact with us. Now, this is important because the two beings that we used at that time to help us, our planet, you had what was called the Athien, and that's Aethien, these were ETs that resembled praying mantis insects, and they are white to golden color and about 2 feet tall. They are emissaries of peace and worked along with what are called the Ranthia, and the Ranthia are dimensional travelers and peace ambassadors that are not fully matter-based. They appear as a ghost, but possess the ability to manifest as a human, animal, or solid object. These are shapeshifters, as we call them, and most often appear as a hologram. The main problem with the ET form of genetic manipulation that was going on in those days, 100,000 years ago, they refer to this as impulse codes, which manifested as a three-dimensional distortion of reality to unsuspecting and our human beings at the time. So even without conscious awareness or permission, this technique is coded into the memory so that past experiences would be wiped out and brainwashing scenarios substituted. It's not mere suggestion or hallucination. It's an actual alteration of the DNA and the neurological system of the individual. So this is pretty heavy. Well, with the success or the assistance of the Ranthia and the Athien, Kamar and his group were able to, with them, to actually set up defenses for these impulse codes and this other electrical war phenomena, and eventually peace was established. And he was able to perceive himself. Now, he returned to Muvia with a very successful mission under his belt. This was one of his earlier missions. And he was able to be empowered by knowing that in the future he's going to become one heck of an unusual chrononaut with a very excellent track record. Now, does this scenario, is this ring a bell to you? Are you saying you can identify with this?
Well, strangely, I can't say that I identify with it, but when you talked about electric wars, I had a sudden jolt of very powerful deja vu.
Because the electric wars did not just occur 100,000 years ago. It was all the way through history until about 1500 BC. So there were lots of different times when the electric wars were relevant. And electric wars are not well reported, by the way. If you read the ET literature or anything to, UFO literature, if you will not see a lot of references to electric wars. It's extremely rare and hard to find. So it's not like it's been reported like abductions or other forms of ET contact.
No, I've never heard the phrase before.
Yeah, and impulse codes is also something that, I'd never heard of either in the literature. So here's an example of a man whose future life was as a chrononaut, and these chrononauts, by the way, they do come back in time and have been all throughout history, and there's also Men in Black in the future, which also adds to the somewhat conspiracy aspect of it. The Men in Black are not real cool. I mean, they're not very spiritual. Most of these time travelers are very spiritual. Time travel will be around from the year 3050 AD all the way to the year 5000. So we got 2,000 years of history here, and the last 1,500 years of that, it'll be done by teleportation.
Well, Bruce, this has been absolutely amazing. I am just kind of reeling here, and if you read Past Lives, Future Lives Revealed, there is something remarkable here. This is a guy, Dr. Bruce Goldberg, who has done something very remarkable and very special in this world of ours. A way of being conscious and of looking at reality that is so different from the kind of chain-bound ways that we look at things for the most part. This is a man who has released himself, not only his spirit, but his mind, into a whole different way of thinking and looking at things. Valuable, yes, I would say so, and very, very eerily memorable to me, and I'd like to thank you for having been with us. For subscribers, you can listen to Dr. Goldberg work with me, and I'm fascinated, Doctor, to find out what that is going to be like. My goodness. So this is Whitley Strieber. It's Dreamland. Next up, Linda Moulton Howe. Past lives, future lives. Dr. Bruce Goldberg makes a fascinating case in his book. Plus, in the book, he shows you how you can test his case yourself. You can actually test this by finding your own past and future lives. He lays out how to do it. It's not hard. And will you find just your own imagination, or will it be something really, really surprising? Well, there's one way to find out. Get the book from the unknowncountry.com store. One reporter who loves mysteries is radio's leading science journalist, Linda Moulton Howe. She's an Emmy Award-winning TV producer, documentary filmmaker, and writer, and the reporter and editor for EarthFiles.com, the Internet's most respected edge science website. She investigates new and unusual aspects of science, medicine, and the environment. Today, she has an extraordinary report for us on E.T. technology being bled into our world. Here she is, back from Italy and in Philadelphia once again, Linda Moulton Howe.
That's right, Whitley. I've had some fascinating discussions both in Italy and back here in the United States recently because of the upcoming X conference in Washington, D.C. next month. And part of the context of our discussions has been my own memory 21 years ago, back on April 9th, 1983, when I was at Kirtland Air Force Base in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and interviewing an Air Force Office of Special Investigations agent named Richard C. Doty. I was then working on a documentary special for Home Box Office, and the working title was UFOs, the E.T. Factor. During that meeting at Kirtland, Richard Doty handed me several typed pages as he said, "My superiors have asked me to show these to you. You can read them and ask me questions, but you cannot take notes." The top page of the typed pages that he handed me said, in all caps, "Briefing paper for the President of the United States of America on the subject of unidentified aerial vehicles, also known as UAVs." The paper summarized more than half a dozen crash retrievals of what were referred to as extraterrestrial vehicles from a variety of locations in New Mexico, Arizona, and even the nation of Mexico. The paper also referred to entities, both dead and alive, retrieved from those crashed aerial vehicles, and they were called extraterrestrial. Two kinds were specified. One was small and gray, and another was simply referenced as, quote, the talls, unquote, in this briefing paper. When I asked Doty if the talls were the blonde types also called Nordics, he said yes. The last page of the briefing paper had a list of projects that our government had been operating, including Project Aquarius. Aquarius was described as an effort to study all extraterrestrial technology, try to back-engineer it, and apply what was learned to America's own space program. While I was trying to produce that Home Box Office special, I was told by a number of sources that the retrieved extraterrestrial craft were controlled by the minds of the ET pilots through head and hand devices. I was also told that the craft were not assembled the way we do airplanes with metal sheeting and rivets. The solid silver discs and other shapes were said to be grown as we would a crystal from solution. Further, I was told our government had retrieved one or more ET devices which, quote, capture time and play it back, unquote. When I asked, isn't that what we do when we film or videotape? Richard Doty said, no, it is my understanding, his understanding, that the ET technology literally can replay back sections of timelines. I was also told that the ETs could travel in time. Now it is 21 years after that Kirtland Air Force meeting, and I and several others from a variety of backgrounds are going to meet at the Hilton Washington Hotel in Gaithersburg, Maryland, for the first Exopolitics X conference that will include testimonies and evidence that indicate one or more non-human intelligence are interacting with Earth life. For ticket information to what I think could be a very interesting conference, go to www.x-conference.com. Everything about this upcoming conference is there at www.xconference.com. Some of the speakers that are coming are Grant Cameron and Stanton Friedman from Canada, Nick Pope and Timothy Good from Great Britain, Professor Michael Sala, originally from Australia and now teaching in Washington, D.C., Bob and Ryan Wood, who have assembled the important Majestic 12 documents, and many others. I will be speaking about the U.S. government's strict policy of denial about all extraterrestrial matters in the interest of national security, a policy with punishment to back it up since at least the Truman administration. I will also be presenting a workshop about the extraordinary layered bismuth and magnesium metal pieces that Art Bell and I first discussed on Coast to Coast Radio back in 1996, which allegedly came from the bottom of a wedge-shaped craft, not a disk, retrieved on the northern White Sands Missile Range northwest of Roswell in 1947. One of the biggest questions that we all have had is how successful have American efforts to back-engineer extraterrestrial technologies been? The speaker who will address that question at the X conference is William Hamilton, Executive Director of Skywatch International, who works full-time as a computer programmer analyst at the University of California, Los Angeles. Bill has devoted his private time over the past several years to accumulating testimonies from half a dozen engineers and other scientists about back-engineering efforts, both of physical aircraft and what are called biomorphing technologies, something technological that can change and react like biology. An important source for some of this information was Ben Rich, head of Lockheed's Aerospace famous Skunk Works, which worked on top-secret aerial craft and other advanced technologies. Before Ben Rich died in the mid-1990s, one of his friends named John Andrews, who is also now deceased, asked him several questions about Rich's knowledge of extraterrestrial technology. Answers to some of those questions reached Bill Hamilton through California UFO researcher Bill McDonald. Half a dozen other engineers and scientists have come forward unofficially to Bill Hamilton the past several years to talk about their own first-hand knowledge of extraterrestrial craft and even biological back-engineering. One of the true major centers in all of this, of these back-engineering efforts, has long been Area 51 at Nevada's Nellis Air Force Base, which Bill Hamilton says is also now called, quote, America's Secret Space Base, unquote. Officially, the Air Force has changed its designation of Area 51 to the U.S. Air Force Flight Test Center Detachment 3. This is a very large restricted airspace, covers about 23 by 25 miles, and Groom Lake is at the center of that airspace that no one can fly over without being intercepted or even shot down. This week I talked with Bill Hamilton about some of the secret knowledge at Area 51 and beyond from engineers such as Bill Uhouse and Ben Rich. Bill explained that Lockheed's Ben Rich talked to the Alumni Association of the UCLA School of Engineering in March of 1993. And at the end of Ben Rich's presentation to the engineering students and alumni, he showed a remarkable slide and made some extraordinary comments.
He was showing slides, and the last slide he showed looked like a black disk coming up from the Earth and going into space.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, he said to the audience, we now have the technology to take E.T. home. That's quite a statement.
Yeah.
And the person who was sitting there who heard this was Jan Hartzan. He's a senior project manager at Boeing. He's also a graduate at the UCLA School of Engineering. And he's also the director of MUFON Orange County over here in California.
Well,
I thought that was significant because it definitely confirms that reverse engineering, I mean, when you take it, Ben Rich's statement and his character, his background is nearly unassailable.
He physically was allowed to see and enter an extraterrestrial craft at Area 51?
No, but he did make statements that they were real, and the kind of statements, the positive statements that he made, that we have that technology now, could only mean that he was so involved that he had to have firsthand, hands-on type of experience.
And
why else would he make such statements?
Well, is there anything that is harder that would associate him having firsthand experience with extraterrestrial technology?
Just statements he made to the engineers that, for instance, they discovered that one of their equations was wrong and it was corrected, that we could travel at extremely high rates of speed to the stars, and that wasn't a barrier. And, just statements like that.
But
now, where would those statements, he's basing those statements on technology that he knows was developed.
Well, that was the implication that our government actively had already in operation craft from someplace else, and that we were going to this someplace else?
Well, he didn't actually say we were going. He said we have the capacity to go. Mm-hmm. So, why wouldn't we?
And in Bill Uhouse's story, he was actively involved in back engineering of something in the extraterrestrial context, right?
Well, yes, he was involved in the simulators. So that the simulators were built, according to Bill Uhouse, so that our pilots could learn how to fly these craft. Because, they're not jet aircraft.
Right, and which specific kind did Bill Uhouse have the most information about?
Well, he talked a lot about the sports model, just like Lazar.
Mm-hmm. Anything, though, in terms of this idea that they were sensitive, almost organic? If something...
that idea?
Yeah.
He didn't say much about that I recall.
But Ben Rich did.
Ben Rich did, and there's other sources that have talked along that line.
What did Ben Rich specifically say about this seemingly almost organic nerve reaction?
Well, see, here's the interesting part, okay? Here's Ben Rich, who was the head of Lockheed Skunk Works, talking about biomorphic craft. What is Lockheed doing today? They're experimenting with biomorphic aircraft.
How specifically?
They have some exotic, smart materials that are being developed by the Morphing Project, right? Shape memory alloy, that type of stuff. And recently they made an announcement of metal that was developed that can be cut. You could, but wouldn't cut. It was very lightweight. All of its characteristics match those of testimony that came from the Roswell craft.
Right, the metal that seemed to have memory, that if you crunched it up, it would flatten itself back out.
And that's a recent one. But these morphing aircraft, there's a small model that's being tested out here at Lockheed. They have one of the projects on that for NASA.
And what about building something like a disc or a triangle out of crystal from liquid? More about that after this break. This is Linda Moulton Howe reporting from earthfiles.com for Dreamland.
The work of Linda Moulton Howe, the amazing work of Linda Moulton Howe, the world's greatest reporter of edge news and edge topics. She has got a website, earthfiles.com. Go there frequently. You will never forget what you find on earthfiles.com. The best website, the best reporting of its kind in the world. Linda Moulton Howe, earthfiles.com. Don't miss a single day.
In some of the paper notes that were taken about the comments by Lockheed's Ben Rich when he spoke in 1993 before the UCLA graduate students and the alumni, he talked in more detail about how they were beginning to understand that these extraordinary craft that have been retrieved in various parts of the United States had actually been grown like crystals from liquid.
He said that there were two kinds of UFOs, and he called them unfunded opportunities, right?
Unfunded?
But he said one are the kind we build, and the others are the kind they build, meaning the ETs.
And did he make a distinction between them? Which was which kind?
No. Not that kind of distinction, no. He just said there were two kinds.
And did he describe what they look like?
He didn't go into a lot of descriptions, except the Roswell craft was the basis, according to him, of our designs for kind of these triangular type plan forms.
Right.
And some of the UAVs.
Which would fit into that term wedge-shaped that is linked to the bismuth magnesium layered metal that I'm going to talk about also at the X conference.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And in that wedge-shaped vehicle, what did Ben Rich say about it having some kind of organic response to people or something?
I don't know what he said, but I have notes here from... There's several scientists and engineers that are very interested in the anti-gravity developments that are going on. This is very interesting to me, how the craft are maybe related to a growing quasi-crystal structure.
A growing quasi-crystal structure.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you understand that to me?
He says the technologies used to grow UFOs in zero-G vats using chain molecules as blueprints in all shapes and sizes to include the wing forms, triangles, and discs are as complex a set of metallurgical chemistries as the organic chemistries that create organic life as we know it.
Wow.
Their systems function as metallic crystalline mimics of organic neurobiological patterns. Their processors mimic the function structures and forms of living nerves and muscle tissue down to molecular levels. After 51 years of reverse engineering attempts, the biomorphic hull forms of the top-secret Wave Rider stealth and spy plane designs and our wave propagation technology, to include lasers and microprocessors, are just in their infancy. Now, what struck me about that, and that may be something taken from McDonald's notes on this, was back in 1953. We're going back to the era of the contactee. There was a contactee named Orfeo Angelucci, and he stated in his book that saucers were grown, not manufactured, in crystal solutions, and thus are all one piece, with systems internally generated within the structure of the craft.
And now you're talking...
Supposedly, the Roswell ship was a winged metallic crystalline, multi-layered, there's that multi-layer again, aerospacecraft. These vehicles were put together or grown in a liquid metal vat, following a chain molecule as a blueprint. Its wings morphed out from its porpoise-like fuselage, and its two vertical stabilizers resembled the dorsal fins of either a doll porpoise or porbeagle shark.
Did you talk about these notes with Bill Uhouse?
No. No, the last contact I had, of course, with Bill Uhouse was back a few years ago. It had to be in the 90s. One thing is, I was in contact with a retired Marine sergeant whose name was Charles Suggs, and Bill Uhouse around the same time. And Suggs, who had gone on to get a degree in engineering, had been on a crash retrieval in the Vietnam era, in Vietnam, whereby they retrieved a craft and placed it aboard an aircraft carrier. And
what was its shape and color and size and so forth?
It was a disc, and it was about, 10 meters in diameter, small one.
Did he know anything about the types that were on that craft?
Oh, you mean the beings?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
No, he just dealt with the engineering part of it.
Right.
And one of the reasons why he was involved was his father was involved. His father was a Navy commander, and according to Suggs, was present with Eisenhower at Edwards Air Force Base in 1954 when there was contact that was made.
And what was the father's first-hand information about the Eisenhower encounter?
He reported that a craft had landed, and there were two beings who were visible to him, and they looked very human. But they had these almost, their eyes were extremely light blue, almost being colorless. And they had wispy blonde hair. That's about all I remember from it. And the one who was approached didn't want anyone to get closer than 3 feet from him.
Did they understand why?
No.
And this is Eisenhower. Is this now, we're talking about the famous alleged, did he go to the dentist or not?
Yeah. That's the incident.
Now, what did this Navy officer say actually happened between these two blonde beings and Eisenhower?
Okay. Coming up to the notes. Okay. Retired USMC Charles Suggs. I contacted him in September 1994. His father was Commander Charles L. Suggs, USN, from he lived from 1909 to 1987. He was stationed with the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Board of Research and Development, Committee of Electronics, and the E-Ring at the Pentagon. His father attended landing at Edwards Air Force Base in February 1954 and met Nordics with flaxen long hair and pale blue eyes. Suggs' own experience happened during the early Vietnam era when he was aboard an aircraft carrier in the Pacific. As part of a special operations group, he was briefed on the aliens. He was aboard when they retrieved a craft and housed on the carrier in the late 50s and brought it into San Francisco Harbor. Sergeant Suggs told me that the S-band radar in the 1900 to 2900 megahertz band can be tuned to interfere with saucer's guidance system. The S-band radar is in the 2,000 to 4,000 megahertz range of radar and electronic countermeasure frequency band designation.
So that we could use radar to interfere with their propulsion system and bring them down.
It interferes with that. He said they had a triad array of gravity drive amplifiers. He called the sports model referred to by Lazar as the IRC-16, meaning Interstellar Recon Craft of 16 meters.
What was summarized as the communication with Eisenhower, and what was the consequence?
They wanted to know what we were going to do with all those atomic bombs that were I guess, somewhere on the base ready to be loaded into aircraft.
And I have heard this half a dozen other times, that the greatest concern allegedly expressed to people in our government going back to the end of the 1940s to the early 1950s was stopping any kind of nuclear testing and to avert warfare on the surface of this planet. To me, what is strange, Whitley, out of all this, the details continue to pile up. This is only one speaker at this X conference in Washington presenting from his several years of talking with half a dozen people off the record in this kind of detail that has not been made public. And yet we know that we did go forward with doing atomic testing. We did drop bombs on Japan. And I always am left with a question that if there was this kind of concern in the technology, is this advanced, has been described by Ben Rich and others, then why would atomic development on this planet not have been stopped 100%? And why would that not have been the perfect introduction to an advanced intelligence that would come here and say, we're not going to allow you to blow up this planet? These paradoxes and contradictions in the last half-century of all of these reports from military intelligence and civilians about encounters with something considered not human that make these kinds of warnings and have these kinds of advanced technologies, and yet we have still not been introduced or even stopped in our own experimentation with atomic energy. This is very puzzling to me.
Well, I think, Linda, that it's quite possible that whoever is out there is willing to pretty much let us do what we want, but with consequences, and the consequences of our going down the path we went down was there is no contact. We don't get to leave. We're stuck here. We can build all the bombs we want. We can drop 500 tons of depleted uranium on Afghanistan and 10 times that much on Iraq and blow up Nagasaki and Hiroshima and spread atomic weapons to Pakistan and India and whatever we want. Mm-hmm. But the consequence is we can't leave. We have to stay here. So it seems that perhaps a decision was made back in the 50s, if this is true, that we would build the bomb instead of reach out to the cosmos.
And if it's true that we have technologies, as Ben Rich described, that could take ET home, that means going to allegedly other solar systems. Bill Hamilton says today, through people such as Dan Burrish and other engineers, that one of the biggest areas of experimentation, and supposedly we have technology, is dealing with time travel. What the implications are there of being able to travel in the stars, but also to be able to go forward and backward in time, is a staggering idea.
And my guess is that we have very limited capabilities, that we may have the knowledge even of being able to leave the solar system, but I doubt if we have the ability. I would think not. If they've hidden even that from us, oh my, we are in the grip of demons.
Or we are such babies, and that we're such dangerous babies, that something out there is really trying to protect us from ourselves.
Or protect themselves from us. Linda Moulton Howe, it's been great. Linda's website, earthfiles.com.
Bull worship religion. The bull one was the majority, by the way. But as you know, Art is, shall we say, a little obsessed with cats, in his life. And this was, to me, very relevant to what he does now. At the same time, the media involved, it just fit in. And when I described it to him on Dreamland about 5 years ago, he said, well, doctor, it fits, I'll tell you. And I think it does, too. And this is an example of what one can do with an Akashic record scan. And by the way, the script for that, for this technique called the Akashic record scan is in the Past Lives, Future Lives Revealed. It's also on my website for your people out there who can access it and download it right from the homepage.
Okay, well, this is, I'm really having fun. I have to tell you, I've got so many questions now. My head is kind of spinning here. Okay, let me start out. Let's start where probably everybody wants to start. Who the heck are you? It's so cool. Tell us about yourself a little bit.
Well, my background is unusual in the sense that I started off, I had undergraduate training in biology and chemistry, and then I went to dental school and practiced dentistry for 13 years, actually, and 11 of those 13 years were only part-time. When I was a senior in dental school in 1974, I actually started dealing with hypnosis and trying to experiment with the concept of taking people into past lives. I had read the Bridie Murphy story, if you're familiar, from the 1950s. A man named Maury Bernstein in 1956 wrote this humongous bestseller about a documented case of a past life regression. And I did it more like just as a kind of a toy, a hobby, if you will. The very first patient I worked with, however, was a woman who was able to overcome 2 habits and a phobia. And that said to me, look, I'm a clinician, and there's something more to this other than just titillation. This is therapeutic. And so therefore, and she was also a graduate student in a master's social work program, so she was, very attuned also to the concept of therapeutic orientations. So I said, okay, if this is what the universe wants, I'm going to do it. And since then, I've done 35,000 regressions and progressions in over 14,000 different patients. And, people, when they talk about, by the way, subsequent to my dental degree, I also have a master's in counseling psychology, and I've written about 30 articles in scientific journals to go along with now. This is my 17th book, Past Lives, Future Lives Revealed. And I do a lot of education with the public. I do workshops. In fact, on my website, your listeners out there can focus. And if they live in Canada, I'll be there in May and June, and all my workshops are posted on there on the workshop link, if you will. But what was interesting about the documentation, see, people always talk about reincarnation. They say, look, either you accept it or you don't. The most recent Gallup poll showed that 58% of Americans now believe in reincarnation. That's a surprising figure to most people. So it's not the minority, now it's the majority. You could win the White House with those numbers,
Yeah.
But secondly, I did a case in 1988 of a woman who was, I call her Ivy, not her real name, and she was obsessively attracted to a man who literally tried to murder her on 3 different occasions in her current life. As it turned out, she had 46 past life regressions done. In 20 of those, the same man, we'll call him Johnny, murdered her in every way you can possibly imagine. And at the same time, she gave me of her last life. Most recent one was in Buffalo, New York, as a woman named Grace Doze. And I had that information, but I didn't do a lot of research on it. I just sort of she was able to break this negative relationship. We call this a retribution soulmate. It's a negative one. And she was able to go on with her life. Well, as it turns out, subsequent research showed that this was an unbelievably documented case, eventually turned over to CBS to do the documentation. And in 1994, the Search for Grace was aired as a TV movie based on my second book of the same name by CBS, and it was one of the most documented cases of the last century, because 2 of the facts of the 24 she gave me did not corroborate with newspaper reports. As it turned out, she was right, the reporters were wrong, and in New York, unlike California where I live, in Los Angeles here, you have to get political permission, and a paper trail has to exist to go into birth and death certificates. Nobody did that from 1927 until 1992 when CBS did the research. So it stands out as an unbelievably documented case, but also it was a lot of fun. A lot of people saw the movie. And it just gave additional credibility, if you will, to the field on a scientific basis or a real basis, not just some woman who allegedly had a fantasy, which a lot of people think regressions are. They're actually not. So then, with the concept of a 1982, my first book, Past Lives, Future Lives, if you will, was released, which is the first book ever written about taking people into future lifetimes. Now, I know I'm not the first person in the world to ever do that, but nobody wrote anything on it. I don't know why, but nobody decided to do that until 1982 when I did Past Lives, Future Lives. Well, when it comes to progression now we have a situation where people say, now look, regression is bad enough, progression, you got to be kidding. Well, when you deal with taking people as far forward as the 50th century, which I've done, obviously you have to be pretty patient to perceive things occurring. But when you do age progressions, going into the future of this life is what I refer to as age progression. And by the way, there is a script on that in the Past Lives, Future Lives Revealed book too. What I can do is document things that actually occur in the future and then see if they actually occur. In June of 1996, a woman came to me from New York City. Her name was, I call her Tammy. She was just graduated from college, and she was going to go to Europe the last half of the summer, and she wanted to come out to Los Angeles to my office to do some out-of-body travel and to do some progressions going to the future, which, of course, I'm well known for, and I said, fine. She was a great student. She's a bright young woman, just everything going for her. While she's in town, most of my patients come out of town. They stay here for like 5 days. She was able to perceive little things in her life about an hour or a half a day or a day in advance that actually took place and came true during the 5 days she was here. So she had a good psychic hit record, if you will. She goes home to New York, and then about 2 weeks later, about third week in June, she calls me up.
He's been on everything, CBS News, Regis and Kathy, CNN, Oprah, you name it. So now he's on Dreamland, and I was reading your book. You had a very interesting experience involving Art Bell back when he was the host of Dreamland and Coast to Coast AM. Why don't we begin? But first, I'd like you to tell us your website, which is quite fascinating.
Okay, it's www.dr, that's small d as in David, r as in Robert, and then you spell out my name, BRUCEGOLDBERG.com. So it's a drbrucegoldberg.com with the DR for the doctor.
Okay, and later on, for our subscribers, there's going to be a very interesting thing done. I'm going to do one of these regressions. We're going to find out something about what my future life lives may or may not be. We'll just see what it's like. But anyway, before we go on, tell us, Dr. Goldberg, and I'm going to ask you all kinds of questions about yourself in a moment.
Sure.
But I want you to tell us this thing about Art Bell, because it's very interesting and arresting, and it sort of gets us in the mood, if you will.
Okay. Well, the technique is called an Akashic record scan, and what that means is that when the psychic reads a person, we can also be trained to do this ourselves. An Akashic record is like a chart of all our past, present, parallel, and future lives. So you go into parallel lives too. So with Art, I did a Akashic record scan to kind of focus in on his karmic purposes, that what he did in the past that may have related to his hosting. He created the Coast to Coast AM and the Dreamland, of course. So what I found out was that in 50,000 BC, Art lived in Atlantis, and he was a geophysicist/quantum physicist by the name of Draco, D-R-A-K-O. And he developed mathematical models for time travel that were, in fact, accurate. He was married at the time to a woman named Myra, M-E-I-R-A-H, which was the past life of Ramona, his current wife. Okay? And he accurately predicted the first of 3 major cataclysms that occurred on Atlantis at about 50,000 BC. Now, the problem was he wanted to get the message out to the public to save many lives because of the pre-knowledge of this cataclysm. Nobody would let him do anything. Atlantis had television and radio, by the way. There was a medical reporter, a TV reporter by the name of Forat, who was the only one to grant Draco airtime so that he could announce these catastrophes, and many thousands of people, including Myra, his wife, and Forat, the medical reporter, and many thousands were saved. Draco went down with the island, so to speak, or at least the first phase, and was killed as a result of staying on Atlantis during the actual cataclysm. Forat, by the way, the medical TV reporter, was one of my past lives, which made it even more interesting, and at least to me personally. And Draco and Myra both belonged to a religion in Atlantis that worshipped cats. There were 2 major religions. One worshipped cats, and one was the bull.
Welcome, subscribers, to your special virtually commercial-free edition of Dreamland. You'll hear one commercial for our sale in our store, and you'll hear commercials for the book, and that is it. Nothing more than that. And I hope you enjoyed it. And also, don't miss the special subscriber interview this week. It is remarkable. Dr. Goldberg reads my past and future lives, a very unexpected, fascinating, and wonderful thing. Next week, we have Plum Island, Lab 257. Do you know there's an island right off the coast of Connecticut where Lyme disease probably originated? And this is a quite startling story about a problem that if you live anywhere in the Northeast, or in fact anywhere in this country, you need to know about. Plum Island, Lab 257. Don't miss it next week. Thanks very much for subscribing to this website and keeping it all going. I owe it to you. And especially for you, next week we have an analysis of the oil situation. As you know, Shell Oil has recently massively reduced its reserves. Certain countries, as we have been saying on Unknown Country for some time, are overstating their reserves in order to get loans. And the reality is there's an oil crisis brewing unlike anything we've ever seen before, because there's a lot less oil out there than has been claimed. We want you to stay ahead of the game, and that's why we're setting this up. You will have get a real insight into what to expect and how to deal with it in your own life next week as a subscriber to Unknown Country. What's that beautiful music you're hearing? Well, that is from Gifts of the Angel, Stephen Halpern's lovely album, which is on sale right now at the unknowncountry.com store. Click on the store, go to the great sales section, and you will find all kinds of lovely stuff on sale right now. The sale is just about over. When these things go out of stock, they're gone forever. So do go to the unknowncountry.com sale. Well, I'm talking to Dr. Bruce Goldberg right now, and this is fascinating. Past Lives, Future Lives Revealed. Dr. Goldberg, you may remember, is the author of a very, very famous book, Past Lives, Future Lives. He was the guy who made the breakthrough into the whole concept that we could find out our future lives, and that he feels there are time travelers actually coming back into our era from the future, something, as you know, having the author of The Secret School is near and dear to my heart. And I will be I'm just so eager to talk to him. He's also a hypnotherapist par excellence and known as one of the greats. And
it's 1996, and she goes, "Doctor, I have an emergency." And I said, "Tammy, I retired from dentistry to get away from emergencies. What's going on?" And she said that I see myself going to Europe next month, July, and my plane takes off at JFK. It goes up in the air, it goes down, I crash, and I die. What do I do? And I said, "Tammy, I encourage people to be empowered, psychically empowered. Let me give you a little hint. Change your flight, okay? Give me a call at the end of the summer." She calls me around Labor Day when she gets back from Europe, and she's very excited, and she says, "Doctor, you saved my life," which, of course, I did not do. And I said, "What's going on?" She was going to go on TWA Flight 800.
Oh, my God.
Now, July 17th, 1996, 230 people are on the astral plane because of that particular plane crash. She would have been 231. So not only are progressions real, in this case, it saved her life. So this is the laws of the universe. You can actually do that. The future is plastic, and you can avoid catastrophes by having this precognition, if you will, or I call progression into the future. Now, going into future lives...
that happened to a relative of mine last night.
Really?
Yeah, I'll tell you what happened. He and his wife they live out somewhere on the West Coast. My son lives in San Francisco, and this is another relative, and I think they live in, Santa Barbara, I think it is. Anyway, we were talking on the phone today, and he said, I had the weirdest thing happen last night. I was just panicking and very nervous. He's a very quiet guy, very easygoing. He said, I couldn't sleep. I kept waking up, and I kept thinking there's going to be an earthquake. Something is wrong. Something is just really, really wrong. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, a prowler tried to get into their house. And he was wide awake, waiting for as he said, I was waiting for the sky to fall. And he'd been aware of this all evening. It had been just torturing him. He didn't know what it was, but he just knew something was about to happen.
But he was getting a little, this is what we call, now this is actually an Akashic Record scan is what he's doing. This is what we call a warning psychic experience, where his higher self was trying to alert him that there is a problem. He may not have gotten all the specifics, but he knew something was up, so he was prepared for something rather than just being totally taken out of context and not being able to perhaps handle the situation as ideally as he could have, you see.
Now, we're going to get right back, and I'm going to ask you when we get back, it's exactly why would it be that one person would have something like that happen and another guy, a prowler, first time he sees the prowler is when the guy's standing over him in the bed. This is Whitley Strieber. It's Dreamland. We'll be right back. Past Lives, Future Lives. Dr. Bruce Goldberg makes a fascinating case in his book. Plus, in the book, he shows you how you can test his case yourself. You can actually test this by finding your own past and future lives. He lays out how to do it. It's not hard. And will you find just your own imagination, or will it be something